Yeah. So we covered up to Esther chapter 3 last time we met. And I gave you lots of a background as to exactly um, when this really happened and what year it really happened. So when we actually trace back the human histories, we just kind of understand why Xerxes was lonely and he was stressed out, and why Haman wanted to remove the Jews from the land. So we just kind of learned some background of the story. So we're going to continue on chapter 4. So we're going to read some story, and I think we should be able to actually finish the Esther today, I hope. Esther chapter 4. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city. And he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. In every province, whenever the king's commands and his decree reached, there was great moanings among the Jews, with fastings, weeping, and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's young woman and her annuities came and told her the queen was deeply distressed, and she sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for uh, Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend to her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasures for the destructions of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destructions, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her and command her to go to the kings to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. The Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and the people of the king's province know that if any man or woman goes to the king's inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law to be put to death, except the one to whom the king hold out the golden scepter so that he may live. But as for me, I have not been called to come into the king's these 30 days. And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all other Jews, for if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. Young woman, I and my young woman will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the kings, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. So when you read this story, as I mentioned, Haman wanted to remove the old Jews because the Mordecai did not really bow down to him and show respect to him. And that was what triggered for Haman to really decide to remove the entire Jews from the land. He even actually just give lots of money to the king's treasure. And as I mentioned, this happened after the Xerxes had the failure of the conquered Greece. And because he lost so much of money and people during that war, obviously he needed more money into the king's place, because at this time he was preparing to do two things. He's sort of the things he just thinking about whether there's a way he can actually revenge the Greece, but at the same time he also planned to spend a lot of time building a lot of the structures in Persia. So those are the two things. So because of what he wanted to do, he needed a lots of money. So he collected a lots of taxes, and he actually just trying to prepare a lot of stuff. As I mentioned, this happened around BC 474. So this time around, whatever that the king is actually can get anything from people, he's willing to just to do it. And obviously Haman just request him to just put a signet rings with the decrees to remove the Jews from the land, and he okayed it because he doesn't have any connections with the Jews. I mean, obviously, these Jews are very small countries or the province, out of 127 province that he managed and controls. So removing Jews for him, it is no big deal. So whatever he takes to just to collect the money, he wouldn't mind. But once Haman planned, and he actually sent the decree out to all 127 province, now he realized that because of what he did, the entire Jewish community could be removed from the land. Once he heard the news, then he just put on the sackcloth and he cried out at the king's the entrance. And since he was actually crying out, and he was told, all the Jews were also crying out and moaning, and he was literally sitting out the king's gate with the sackcloth on and put on ashes. Since there's a lot of the fuss around the city, so Esther heard about what's going on. So he sent Anuch out to Mordecai to find out what is really happening, because she was in the palace, so she doesn't know all the details of what was happening. But anyone who's actually wearing a sackcloth and putting ashes on their heads, they're not allowed to come into the king's palace. So Esther sent the cloth so that Mordecai could change his clothes so he can come into the palace to let her know what is happening. But the Mordecai declined that offer, and I'm not going to take off this the sackcloth and put on this nice clothes at this time, because we as a Jews are in desperate need right now. So they were exchanging the message back and forth between the Esthers and Mordecai. So there's a Hanuch. Hanuch was just going back and forth and delivering the message. And when Esther heard the news, exactly what happened, I mean, obviously she was shocked as well. So Mordecai was asking Esther to just ask the Xerxes and say, hey, I want you to just go to the kings and, just ask the king to really just, stop this. But by law in Persia, whether it's a queen or any servants, without kings calling, showing up in the palace and approaching the king, could be actually killed. And you have to understand not only just the situations he's in, but at the same time, as I mentioned, after Persians invaded into Greece, and so many the young men died at the battlefield, right? And because he's also collecting lots of taxes, obviously the reputations and respect for the Persian king wasn't that great because people were complaining about all these troubles they are getting into. So therefore, as we have learned, there are many people trying to assassinate the king, whether they are close or not close. So anyone could really just approach the king and assassinate. So for that reason, king always have to be alert. Just like in today's world, all the presidents, they have to really just protected by the secret agents to make sure that they are protect the presidents. And it's very similar situation. So not if someone just approach, whether they're the wise men or the queens or some bodyguard, whoever they are, if the king does not call them and then show up, could really mean that they are just coming to assassinate. So obviously the law was actually put in that anyone approach the king without the king's calling them could be put to death. So this is it's almost a law that not everyone could actually show up. So the Esther is telling the Mordecai that I would like to go to the kings and plead for this issue, but king has not been calling me for the last 30 days. I cannot just show up in king's place and then ask something, because if I do it, then I will get killed. So Mordecai did not care. Our situations here is even more dangerous than your situations. You have to figure it out how to do it. So Mordecai was being a little bit, insisting the Esthers that you need to do something about it. If you don't do anything at this point, and if the Jews get killed, obviously you're not going to be actually just, save yourself. Just because you're in palace and you're the queen does not mean you will be safe. You and your father's house will be perished. So almost the Mordecai was threatening the Esther to do something. So Esther is asking Mordecai, okay, I will do something. However, before I do something, I want to gather all the Jews in Susa and ask them to fast and don't eat anything and fast for me for 3 days. I will do the same thing with my own, the people who serve me, and I will do the fasting as well for 3 days. And after that 3 days, and then I'm going to go out to the king's place and see what I can do. And if I get killed, I get killed. So she really determined that she would just proceed to the king's, even risking her life. This is a very similar things that we have seen in the past. When you look at the chapter 4, verse 16, we'll just read one more time. Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young woman will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king's, though it is against the law. If I perish, I perish. So one thing that we need to kind of understand this is Esther has a two-way to handle the situations. Number one is she's risking her life to move forward to save his people. Or she would just be safe and not moving into, or the risking her life to really just to leave the situation as is. So there's two options that she can choose: either risking her life or not risking her life. So we will see the contradiction here. Later on, we're going to find out that she risked her life to save his own people. So when she approached the king without the king's calling, obviously she's moving into the path of death. Moving into the path of death is actually bring her to the path to life to his people. When you think about this for a moment, this is very similar to the older story that we have seen. Let's just take a look at something here. Let's go to Genesis chapter 43 for a moment. Genesis chapter 43. Genesis chapter 43, we're just going to read this one. Now the famine was severe in the land, and when they had eaten and grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, Go again, buy us a little food. But Judah said to him, The man solemnly warned us, saying, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brothers with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. Israel said, Why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother? They replied, The man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother? What we told him was in answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, Bring your brother down? And Judah said to Israel, his father, Send the boy with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I will be pledged of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you, set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, you would now have returned twice. Then their father Israel said to them, If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bag and carry a present down to the man, a little balm and little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take also your brother and arise, go again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, and many he sent back your other brother and Benjamin. As for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. So the man took this present, and they took double the money with them and Benjamin. They rose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. So this is the story that we have learned from when the Israel and their families was starved because the famine was in the land and they could not just find the food. So their sons, Jacob's sons, went down to the Egypt, and obviously they met Joseph, but they did not recognize Joseph because the Joseph was in a high place, and they did not recognize. But obviously Joseph recognized his brothers. So he planned everything, right? He already knew what was happening and realized that Benjamin was not with him. And obviously, from the Joseph's perspective, he was nervous. The reason he was nervous is because he doesn't know whether their brothers has changed. Because their brother is the one who sold him, right? So since he does not see his brother Benjamin, he doesn't know what happened to his brother, because Benjamin is the only brother that Joseph had, because Joseph and Benjamin is the only one. They're the same mother. So he was concerned. So he wanted to see and make sure Benjamin is okay. So when he actually gave them the food, and the next time when they come, make sure to bring the Benjamin. Now, from the Jacob's perspective, Jacob loved the Rachel so much. And therefore, because he loved Rachel, he loved the children from Rachel. There are only two sons, which is Joseph and Benjamin. So since, Jacob thought that Joseph was killed, only son is left from Rachel was Benjamin. So literally, Jacob loved Benjamin and did not want to release Benjamin. So that's why Jacob did not even want to send the Benjamin out to Egypt, because he was afraid that their sons, the other sons, might do harm to Benjamin, or something could happen to Benjamin. If he loses Benjamin, then he has no hope, because at this point, Jacob lost everything what he had. Once he had a lot of stuff, right? He had a love the Rachels, he had Isaacs, and he had, many things on his hand. He's the kind of person who grabs and never release. He's the kind of person who just wants to continue to grab as much as he could. However, now he lost everything. Now only thing that he has is Benjamin that he loves. So now Benjamin is the only thing that he was holding on to. God literally took everything away from Jacob. So he didn't want to lose Benjamin. But now Judah is asking, if you don't let Benjamin to go with us, we will not going to bring any food, because the man said, if you don't bring your brother, don't ever think about seeing me. So we have no options. If you don't send the Benjamin, we will go down and buy the food. But if you don't send the Benjamin, there's no way we're going to see him. Therefore, we won't be able to bring any food. If you do so, I want you to know for sure, not only Benjamin, but every one of us will die, because there's no food. So Jacob was thinking. And he was really just mad. And he was literally telling his son, said, why did you tell you have a brother Benjamin to begin with? Right? He was upset. He was mad. If you did not tell the man that you have a brother, he would not even ask to bring your brother. Why did you tell him? And obviously, they did not tell him for no reason, because Joseph was asking about his brother, literally, without revealing his own identity. So, here's the really important confession that Jacob made, which is verse 14. We're going to read one more time. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, and may he send back your other brothers and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved, my children, I am bereaved. What does this mean? If I lose my child, I will lose it. If I lose Benjamin, I will lose Benjamin. What does that mean? He was the last thing that he was holding on to, Benjamin. He didn't want to release. But now what? He's releasing Benjamin. If I lose, I will lose. That is almost a similar confession. If I die, I would die. Esther made a very similar confession. If I perish, I'll perish. It's almost the same conversation. So, releasing Benjamin from the Jacob's perspective, he's literally taking the death of Benjamin. He's really saying, I will let go of Benjamin, and this is the path to death, then what happened? When he released Benjamin, what happened? He was able to restore everything what he lost, including finding Joseph again. This story is also very similar to the story when God actually brought the people out of Egypt, when they actually reached at the front of the Red Sea. What happened? Obviously, from the Jews' perspective, in front, there's a Red Sea. In the back, there's a people from Egypt that are chasing after them. They have no choice, right? And they cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the God and said, "What should I do?" Literally, God said to Moses, "What are you doing? Let people move forward to the Red Sea." When Moses is saying, "People advance," what does this mean? Jump into the water. What does that mean by jumping to the water? You have a path. What should they do? God is literally telling them to advance into the path of death. When they do that, when they jumped into the water, when they put their foot into the water, what happened? Water started to separate. When they decide to jump into the path of death, that's when God opened the door for them and turned the path to death into the path of life. It's almost the same story. If you throw yourself out, when you jump into the path of death, I'm the one who's going to save you. I'm going to turn this path to death into the path to living. That's exactly what God did. What about this one? Let's go to 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 7. Second Kings chapter 7. We're going to read from verse 1. But Elisha said, "Hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, tomorrow about this time, a seth of fine flour shall be sold for a shekel, and 2 seth of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." Then the captain on whose hand the king leaned said to the man of God, "If the Lord himself should make window in heaven, could this thing be?" But he said, "You shall see it with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it." Now there were 4 men who were leper at the entrance to the gate, and they said to one another, "Why are we sitting here until we die? If we say, 'Let us enter the city,' the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. If we sit here, we die also. So now come, let us go over to the camp of Syrian. If they spare our life, we shall live, and if they kill us, we shall but die." So rose at twilight to go to the camp of Syrians. But when they came to the edge of the camp of the Syrians, behold, there was no one there. For the Lord had made the army of the Syrian hear the sound of the chariots and of the horses, and sound of a great army, so that they said to one another, "Behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the king of the Hittites and king of Egypt to come against us." So they fled away in the twilight and abandoned their tent, their horses, and their donkeys, leaving the camp as it was, and fled for their lives. And when these lepers came to the edge of the camp, they went into a tent and ate and drank, and they carried off silver and gold and clothing, and went and hid them. Then they came back and entered another tent and carried off the things from it, and it went and hid them. Then they said to one another, "We are not doing right. This day is the day of a good news. If we are silent and wait until the morning light, punishment will overtake us. Now therefore, come, let us go and tell the king's household." So they came and called to the gatekeepers of the cities and told them, "We came to the camp of the Syrians, and behold, there was no one to be seen, or heard there nothing but the horse tied and the donkeys tied and the tents as they were." Then the gatekeeper called out, and it was told within the king's household. And the king rose in the night and said to his servant, "I will tell you what the Syrians have done to us. They know that we are hungry, therefore they have gone out of the camp to hide themselves in the open country, thinking, when they come out of the city, we shall take them alive and get into the city." And one of his servants said, "Let some man take 5 of the remaining horses, seeing that those who are left here will fare like the whole multitude of Israel who have already perished. Let us ascend and see." So they took horsemen, and king sent them after the army of the Syrians, saying, "Go and see." So they went after them as far as the Jordan, and behold, all the way was littered with the garments and equipments that the Syrian had thrown away in their haste. And the messenger returned and told the king. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of Syrians. So seth of a fine flour was sold for shekels, and 2 seth of a barley for shekels, according to the word of the Lord. Now the king had appointed the captain on whose hand he leaned to have a charge of the gate. And the people trampled him in the gate. So he died, as the man of God had said when the king came down to him. For when the man of God had said to the king, 2 seth of barley shall be sold for shekels, and the seth of a fine flour for shekels, about this time tomorrow in the gate of Samaria, the captain had answered the man of God, "If the Lord himself should make window in heaven, could such a thing be?" And he had said, "You shall see it with your own eyes, but you shall not eat of it." And so it happened to him, for the people trampled him in the gate, and he died. Now you remember the story. Now Syrian was literally surrounded the Israel, north of Israel, in the Samaria area. So they were literally just put themselves in the palace and inside the fortress, because they could not just go out, because they in the ancient time when they actually attacked the palace, literally they surround the entire city. So therefore, nothing coming out, nothing going out. So obviously, there's a limited resources within the palace, and when they just eat and consumes all the foods inside the palace, literally they will die, right? So they literally just don't just surround the entire city for a little while. So therefore, the people who inside the fortress literally consumed all the food, and there was nothing left. So therefore, the price of the food just jumped so high, so no one can really buy anything. So the money did not worth anything. So at that time, there was 4 lepers at the gate. We're dying here. There's no food left for us. So for us, we either die inside or just get killed by the Syrians. It's no difference. So let's just go into Syrians and see if there's some food that we can actually find. So 4 lepers just went out to the city, to the Syrians' camp. What they found out is Syrians fled, because the God literally made these 4 lepers the footstep, as just as if the whole army was coming against them. So they literally fled. And when the 4 lepers approached the Syrians' camp, they realized that there was no one left. They left everything behind: food, donkeys, Everything was there. So remember, let's go back to the confession they made. Verse 4 says this: If we say, let us enter the city, the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. If we sit here, we die also. So now come, let us go over to the camp of the Syrians. If they spare our lives, we shall live. If they kill us, we shall but die. It's almost the same confession. If they let us live, we'll live. If they kill us, we'll die. So literally what they are doing is, I know most likely if we go out to the Syrian camp, they're going to kill us. But if they kill us, we die. What are they doing? They're taking the path of death. But when they actually decide to just move forward to the path of death, what happened? They were able to find the path of living. It's almost the same exact story. This is the part that we have to understand clearly from the Bible. Jesus died. Everyone was crying. Jesus died. The death, God turns into life and living. But what we don't do is we don't want to jump into the path of death. We don't want to die because we think that the path of death is the end. However, when we actually trust in the Lord, jump into the path of death, God is the one who's going to turn into path of death to path of a living. Same story with the Daniel's a friend, right? When Nebuchadnezzar, literally built the statue, and everyone was bowing down before that statue. And Daniel's a friend did not want to bow down to the statue. So Nebuchadnezzar called him out and said, if you don't bow down, I'll give you one more chance to bow down, but if you don't, I'm going to throw you guys into the fire. What was the confession of Daniel's friend?
Even if he didn't say
so they choose to be thrown into the fire, path of death. But when they decide to really just take the path of death, what happened? God turns them into the path of a living. It's almost the same story over and over throughout the Bible. So it is not just the throwing, yourself to the death. But what's the difference is we're trusting in the Lord that God will do this. In the situations like this, they're literally risking everyone's life. Starting from Jacob's family, entire Jews coming out of Egypt, right? And the people of Samaria, and also people of Daniel's friend. They all did. They choose to take the path of death. When they trusted in the Lord, God literally changed the path to living. And Esther literally chose to take the path to death. And that's exactly what happened in chapter 4 of Esther. Let's continue on, coming back to Esther chapter 5. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, in front of the king's quarter, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. When the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight. And he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tips of the scepter. And the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request?" "It shall be given you, even to the half of my kingdom." And Esther said, "If it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for the king." Then king said, "Bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther has asked." So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. And as they were drinking wine after a feast, the king said to Esther, "What is your wish? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled." Then Esther answered, "My wish and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the kings, and if it please the king, to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king had said." When you look at this, let's just take back, as I mentioned, at the time, Xerxes had a lot of thoughts. Because in his kingdom, after his failure of invasion of Greece, obviously he's got lots of things on his head. What should we do, and how to really control this? Not only just controlling this 127 province, what shall I do to revenge this Greece? And what should I do to really build all the structures and architectures that I planned and my father had planned? So there's a lot of things on his head. That's why he wasn't really just to care about seeing anybody, including Esther. But when Esther approached the Xerxes, almost at the exact time when he needed a comfort and when he needed a consolation, she just approached the king. And when the king saw Esther, king's heart was literally melted. "I can give you half of the kingdom to you, my queen. You're just coming to me at the right time to comfort me and console me." So from the king's perspective, Esther looked so beautiful, but at the same time, she was there to really just, there for him. Even though all the people surrounding him, just coming to him, just to kind of like, sort of just giving him the word that he wanted to hear. But Esther was different. Esther wanted to really comfort him. So Xerxes was pleased with all the stuff that Esther was doing. So he actually asked Esther, "Ask me whatever you want. I will give it to you. Even the half of the kingdom, I will give it to you." Because he was pleased and he was happy. But Esther literally did not say anything, but instead, "If you are pleased with me, please come to the feast that I prepare for you again tomorrow with Haman. Then I will tell you what my wish is." So, king's perspective, he was very pleased. And Haman went out that day joyfully and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and servant of the king. Then Haman said, "Even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared." And tomorrow also I'm invited by her together with the king. Yet all this is worth nothing to me. So long as I see Mordecai, the Jews are sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, Let a gallows of 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased the Haman, and he had gallows made. So obviously, Haman's perspective, since Esther only invited king and Haman, not the rest of the wise men, not the rest of the officials, so he felt that he was so special that he's being treated very special by the queen Esther. So he was very joyful and happy. And not only he was invited to Esther's feast today, but also Esther asked him and the king to come to the feast again tomorrow. So obviously he was excited and very happy and joyfully coming back home, and he saw the Mordecai at the king's gate, and he wouldn't bow down again. So he was very upset, but he did not want to ruin his feelings. So even though he was very upset and mad, he just let the Mordecai, he passed it. But when he was boasting about all the parties and how he was being treated by the kings and the queens, and he was so excited, and his wife and all his friends had said, well, I think you're good. You're good. Even though the Mordecai is out there just kind of making you mad, but just disregard it. Tomorrow, let's just, make some sort of like a gallows to be, for the Mordecai to be executed. Tomorrow morning, I want you to go back to the king and then just ask for the king to kill the Mordecai on the gallows, and then be joyfully go to the queen's feast tomorrow night. And he was already excited and say, yeah, that's right. Maybe that's the way I should do. Like he was so excited to say, yeah, great. The next day, chapter 6. On that night, the king could not sleep, and he gave order to bring the book of memorable deed, the chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written how Mordecai had told about the Bigthana and Teresh, who of the king's eunuch, who guarded the threshold, and who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And king said, What honor or distinctions had been bestowed on Mordecai for this? The king's young man who attended him said, Nothing has been done for him. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered that outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai hang on the gallows that he had to prepare for him. And the king's young man told him, Haman is there, standing in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, What should be done to the man who the king delighted to honor? And Haman said to himself, Whom would the king delight to honor more than me? And Haman said to the kings, For the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robe be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, Hurry, take the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing that you have mentioned. So Haman took the robes and the horse, and dressed the Mordecai, and led him through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but the Haman hurried to his house, moaning with his head covered. And Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wife, a man, and his his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is on the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him." So the next day, Haman was excited as he was with his friends and his wife, the previous night, that he actually built the gallows to hang the Mordecai. So he approached the king's gate. And then that night, literally, the king could not sleep. So he actually had the people to just to pull out the chronicle and have them read the story. And the story that they read was exactly how Mordecai to discover the plots of those Nuch try to just assassinate the Xerxes. And when he heard, the king asked, "Oh, that's great. The Mordecai literally is reported to me before they actually did anything. So they were able to, we were able to remove those Anuch and not get assassinated. So what did we do for Mordecai for what he actually reported?" "Nothing, sir." "Nothing? What do you mean, nothing? He literally saved my life. I should have done something to him." So at the same time, he was calling out, "Is there anybody outside?" Well, who was out there? Haman was out there to really just coming to king, asking the king to hang the Mordecai on the gallows that he built. And the king asked Haman, "What should we do, and what should I do to a person who I honor?" And obviously Haman thought he was the one who was actually referring to it. I said, "Oh, you know what, king? So I think you should just pull out the robes. You're going to pull out your, the clothes you wears and, put them on and put the king's crowns and put your horse out, and most, respected official should lead him out to the city and proclaiming, this is what happened when you act, this is what happened, what king will do to the people he honors." So he was thinking that he will be actually riding a horse, but all of a sudden, the king was telling, "Okay, then do exactly what you said. Do not miss any step what you said. Do it to Mordecai." And obviously at that moment, literally, Haman was like, "What? I came here to really just asking for the king to just hang the Mordecai, but now you're asking me to just lead him on your horse with the robes and the crown on him, and then I'm the one who have to shout out to the city, this is the king who honors?" He was literally shocked, and obviously he was speechless. But what is he going to do? This is the orders from the king. He had to do what he had to do, exactly what he described. So he literally took the Mordecai on the horse, led him out to the city gate, shouting out to the whole the people. And then after it was done, literally he was literally pulling out his hair, coming back home, telling his wife and his wise men and said, "This is exactly what happened." When they heard this, oh my God. If this is what happened, you know what? I think whatever plan that you have is not going to succeed. You're going to fall before him. They kind of sensed that this might happen. While that he was literally just, fall in despair, the next verse says, "While they were yet talking with him, the king's Anuch arrived and hurried to bring Haman to the feast that Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went in to feast with Queen Esther. And on the second day, as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king again said to Esther, 'What is your wish, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request, even to the half of my kingdom? It shall be fulfilled.' Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be um, annihilated. Annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, man and woman, I would have been silent, for our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king." Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, "Who is he, and where is he? Who has dared to do this?" And Esther said, "A foe, an enemy, this wicked Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. And the king arose in his wrath from the wine drinking and went into the palace garden. But Haman stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther, for he saw that harm was determined against him by the king. And the king returned from the palace garden to the palace where they were drinking wine, as Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. And the king said, "Will he even assault the queen in my presence, in my own house?" As the word left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, "More, the gallows that Haman has prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, is standing at Haman's house of 50 cubits high." And the king said, "Hang him on that." So they hang Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the wrath of the king abated. Well, as you can see the story here. Well, when he actually came back home and reported to his wife and his friends about what happened when he actually led the Mordecai out to the city, and he had to really just proclaim to the whole city, this is exactly what happens when kings to the person who king is honored. And while he was actually in discussions with his friend, then obviously people came to him and said, "Well, please be ready because you're invited to the Esther's the feast, so just hurry." So he was really just going out to the Esther's the feast with the king, and when he went out, and obviously there were drinkings, and king was in a good mood, and he was just literally asking Esther and said, "Ask me whatever you wish," just like what he asked the previous day. "Whatever you wish, I will give it to you. I will grant it to you. Even if you ask for the half of the kingdom, I will give it to you." And he was in good mood. And this is when Esther literally dropped the bomb and said, "Well, king, please save me and my own people. If my people is being carried as the slave, I would not even ask for this. But now someone is trying to literally remove me and my people from this land." And obviously, king was furious. Who is thinking of my queen and his people to be destroyed? Who is he? Where is he? And the guy right next to you, Haman, right next to you. And imagine how Haman would have actually felt at that moment. He was probably literally face was turned to pale. Like, what? And king was literally in wrath. He literally walked out of the feast to the gardens, the king's garden. He was so furious. And obviously Haman was literally coming to Esther, begging for his life. "Please save me and my family." Well, now the situation's literally turned upside down at this point because Haman was trying to remove the Jews. Obviously, Haman did not know Esther was a Jew because Remember, Mordecai told Esther not to, reveal, you know, your identity. So obviously, no one knew that Esther was Jews. Probably King didn't even really care whether she was a Jew or not, or even forgot that she was a Jew. Obviously, Haman did not know Esther was a Jew. So he went on the couch where Esther was sitting, begging for his life and literally asking for his life. And that's when King came back from the garden, coming back to the feast. When he actually entered back into the feast, he saw that Queen was standing there, and Haman was sitting on the couch where Esther was sitting. And imagine when he saw that. What on earth are you doing? Are you trying to just attack my queen at my site, at my palace? Soon after he finished that statement, literally people came and wrapped him. Literally Haman. And Anuch was reporting to the king, King, I just know that Haman actually built the gallows at his house, 50 cubit high. And King said, Ho ho, all right, if that's what he prepared, let him hang on that gallows. And the place where Haman actually planned to hang Mordecai, the gallows, was the place where Haman was hanged. Chapter 8. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave to Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came before the kings, for Esther had told what he was to her. And the king took off his signet ring which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Then Esther spoke again to the king. She fell at his feet and wept and pleaded with him to avert the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, and the plot that he had devised against the Jews. When the king held out the golden scepter to Esther, Esther rose and stood before the king, and she said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and if the things seem right before the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let an order be written to revoke the letter devised by Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the province of the king. For now, can I bear to see the calamity that is coming to my people? Or how can I bear to see the destructions of my kindred? Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jews, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged them on the gallows, because he intended to lay hands on the Jews. But you may write as you please with regard to the Jews in the name of the kings, and seal it with the king's rings, for an edict written in the name of the kings, and the sealed with king's rings cannot be revoked. The king's scribe were summoned at the time, in the 3rd month, which is the month of Shiban, on the 23rd day, and an edict was written according to all that Mordecai commanded concerning the Jews, to the satrap and the governor and the officials of the province, from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, and also to the Jews in the script and their languages. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed it with the king's signet ring. Then he sent the letter by mounted courier riding on swift horses that were used in the king's service, bred from the royal stud, saying that the king allow the Jews who were in every city to gather and defend their lives. to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate it by armed forces of any people or province that might attack them, children and women included, and to plunder their goods. On that day, throughout all the province of the king Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, a copy of what was written was to be issued as decree in every province, being publicly displayed to all people, and the Jews were to be ready on that day to take vengeance on their enemies. So the courier mounted on their swift horse that were used in the king's service rode out hurriedly, urged by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel. Then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal robe of blue and white, with the great golden crown and the robe of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. The Jews had delight and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city, wherever the king's command and his edict reached, there was gladness and joy among the Jews, a feast and a holiday, and many from the people of the country declared themselves Jews, for fear of the Jews had fallen on them. So let's take a look at something here for a moment. Last time when I was actually explaining, I actually showed you the Jewish calendar. And I mentioned that the Jewish calendar is not the same as the calendar that we use. And even Jews use two different calendar. One is a civilian calendar, and the other one is a religious calendar, right? So let's just take a look at this calendar one more time. Let me share my screen. All right, you see the calendar? Okay. So according to this chapter here, when we actually go back, let's go back to Esther chapter 3 for a moment. Let's go to chapter 2 first. When you go to chapter 2, when you look at the verse 16, it says, "And when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reigns." So when Esther was actually presented to Ahasuerus, that was the 10th month. So when you look at the 10th month, remember the first month of the year by the religious calendar is Nisan. It used to be called Abib month, but now after they actually carried into Babylon, they changed from Abib to Nisan. The Nisan is the first month of the year. So the Nisan year is Nisan month is the first month of the year. Nisan, Iyar, Shiban, Tammuz, Ab, Elul, Tishri, and Heshvan, and Chislev, and Tebeth. This is the 10th month. This is the month when Esther was presented to Ahasuerus. And when you turn to chapter 3, verse 7, it says, in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of the king Ahasuerus, they cast a pur before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month until the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. So, when Haman decided to kill the Jews, the month that he decided was Nisan month, which is the first month of the year. So this is the month when Haman planned to destroy all the Jews in the land. When they actually cast the pur, which is a casting lots. So he was trying to figure it out what month and what day they were going to destroy the Jews. When they cast a lot, they cast a lot to be executed on the month of Adar, which he decided to remove the Jews on the first month of the year, but execution to be done on the 12th month, which is the last month of the year. So that's when he actually he planned to kill the Jews. And then, when you look at the verse 12, then the king's scribe were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and on edict, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satrap and the governor all over all the province, and to the officials of all the people, to every province in its own script, in every people in its own languages. It was written in the name of the king Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. So the first month, on the 13th day, they sent the decree out to all the province in Persia. So this was done on the Nisan month. So then they were waiting all things to happen in the month of Adar. But what we don't know, when did they actually have the feast to invite Haman and the king? We don't know exactly what month they actually had done. However, what we find in chapter 8, when you look at chapter 8, verse 9 says this: the king's scribe were summoned at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Shivan, on the 23rd days. So when is the Shivan month? Shivan month is the Nisan is the first month, Iyar was the 2nd month, and the Shivan was the 3rd month. So at this time, Nisan month is the month that Haman planned to kill all the Jews and sent all the decree. And on the month of Shivan, which is a 3rd month, this is when they had the feast. This is the day, the month that Esther invited the king and Haman, and when Haman was literally hanged on the 3rd month. So how many more months to be left for the first decree to be executed? Still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months for the first decree that he sent out to be executed, because they decide to execute to kill Jews on the month of Adar. Even though Haman was hanged on the gallows on the month of Shivan, what doesn't change is the decree that was sent out to all the province. So this is why Esther was asking the king, please save my people. But as I mentioned last time, when king literally just sent a message with his signet ring, king himself cannot change this, cannot revoke the letter he sent out. So what he decided to do is, okay, in this case, since I cannot revoke the first message that I sent, let's just create the second message. Second message is saying, now this time, the first message said, anyone can rise up, try to kill Jews. But the second letter he sent out, the decree he sent out is, okay, for all the Jews in the land, now you can fight back to the people who is trying to kill you. So you are allowed to kill the people who's trying to kill you guys. So the second decree is giving an option for the Jews to fight back to save themselves. So he put the signet ring again, so no one can change this. So now this is the important things that you have to remember. Since the second decree is issued and saying that you can fight back to kill the people who's trying to kill Jews, and this is the king's will, who is dared to even try to kill Jews at this point? Literally, they're in fear. If they try to kill Jews, what happened? Kings will be mad. So therefore, now the people who rose and plotted to really kill the Jews, they're afraid to execute this. So, continue on. Verse 10. It says, and he wrote in the name of a king Ahasuerus and sealed it with the king's signet ring. Then he sent the letter by mounted courier riding on swift horse that were used in the king's service and bred from royal stud. You might not remember exactly what I said in the past. A while back, when I actually talked about some of the great work that Xerxes' father, Darius, had done. One of the greatest things that Darius had done was he literally, he is the one who built, or not built, but he is the one who literally started the systems like post office. He's the one who built it, the idea of literally post office. What it means is that he paved the road with marble, entire the land of the place where he was ruling. What happened is when king sends the message out to all these provinces that he was ruling, when the messengers ride horses, and when he rides with the horses all day long, and when horses actually getting tired cannot run as fast as the horse can run, he built the place where they can actually switch the messenger, and he turned it over to the next person. So next person riding a new horse rides all the way to the next post office. And then when he reaches the next post office, and then hand it over to the next person. So what happened is the message that kings write can be spread out to all the land of the places where he controls in a fastest way. This kind of system never existed in any other countries previous to Darius. Darius literally built this system. this is what they were talking about. In verse 10, he says, the king's service of bread from the royal stud, right? This is exactly what I'm just talking about. When the kings writes the decrees and send out to all the 127 province, message gets sent out to all the provinces very, very quickly. So it does not get delayed. Imagine, there's no car, there's no fast way to deliver this message. So there's no systems in place. But Darius, which is Xerxes' father, had built the systems that it was the most effective and efficient way to deliver the message to all the province of the places where they were ruling. So they were able to quickly deliver the message to all the land. Now, verse 11 saying, that king allowed the Jews who were in every city to gather and defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate any armed forces of any people or province that might attack them, children and women included, and the plundered and their goods. On one day, throughout all the province of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, which is supposed to be executed, right?
Yeah.
A copy of what was written was to be issued as the decree in every province, being publicly displayed to all people, and the Jews were to be ready on that day to take vengeance on their enemies. So the couriers, mounted on their swift horses that were used in the king's service, rode out hurriedly, urged by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel. So as I mentioned, the message had to be really dispersed out to all the province and the cities as quickly as possible, so no one misses out those decrees, the second decrees. So when this happened, everyone literally took out the sackcloth, and they were really joyful that the second decree was issued, that they are now fight back for their lives. And therefore, 12 month, let's take a look at this month of Adar. When you look at the month of Adar, in our calendar, which is this is our calendar. It's this January, February, March. So in our calendar, this is somewhere between month of February and March of our calendar. Right? So Adar month, as you can see here, the 14th and 15th, literally that happens in the March of our calendar, based on our calendar. So what you will find is the Purim festivals in even today's world is in March. So let's take a look at exactly when is the month of Purim in 2024. Here it is. You see, in 2024, the Purim festival is March 23rd and March 24th. So now you understand where this is started. Why? Because this is based on the month of Adar that the Haman was trying to execute to really kill all the Jews. And this is the day they now received a second decree that they can fight back to the people who are trying to kill the Jews. So let's take a look at chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commands and edict were about to be carried out, on the very day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain the mastery over them, and reverse occurred. The Jews gained mastery over those who hated them. The Jews gathered in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm, and no one could stand against them, for the fear of them had fallen on all people. All the officials of the province, and the satrap, and the governors, and the royal agents also helped the Jews, for the fear of Mordecai had fallen on them. For Mordecai was great in the king's the house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For the man Mordecai grew more and more powerful. The Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and did as they pleased to those who hated them. In Susa, the citadel itself, the Jews killed and destroyed the 500 men, and also killed Parshandath, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Poratha, and Adalia, and Aridatha, and Parmashatha, and Arisai, and Aridai, and Vaizatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamatha, the enemy of the Jews, but they laid no hand on the plunder. That very day, the number of those killed in Susa, the citadel, was reported to the king. And the king said to Queen Esther, "In Susa, the citadel, Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, and also the 10 sons of Haman. What then have they done in the rest of the king's province? Now, what is your wish? It shall be granted you. And what further is your request? It shall be fulfilled." And Esther said, "If it please the king, let the Jew who are in Susa be allowed tomorrow also to do according to this day's edict, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows." So the king commanded this to be done. A decree was issued in Susa, and the 10 sons of Haman were hanged. The Jews who were in Susa gathered also on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they killed 300 men in Susa, but they laid no hand on the plunder. Now the rest of the Jews who were in the king's province also gathered to defend their lives, and got relieved from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they laid no hands on the plunder. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar. On the 14th day, they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were in Susa gathered on the 13th day and on the 14th, and rested on the 15th day, making that a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the village who lived in rural towns hold the 14th day of the month of Adar as a day for gladness, and feasting as a holiday, as a day on which they sent gift of food to one another. And the Mordecai recorded these things and sent a letter to all the Jews who were in the province of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obligating them to keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and also 15th day of the same, year by year, as the day on which the Jew got relieved from their enemies, and the month that had been turned for them for sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday. That day should make them as of feasting and gladness, days for sending gift of food to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews accepted that they had started to do, and that Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast a pur, that is, cast lots, to crush and to destroy them. But when it came before the king, he gave order in writing that his evil plan that he had devised against the Jews should return on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore, they call these days Purim, after the term purred. Therefore, because of all that was written in this letter, and of that they had faced in this matter, and of what had happened to them, Jews firmly obligated themselves and their offsprings and all who joined them, that without fail they would keep these 2 days according to what was written and at the time appointed every year, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generations in every clan, province, and city, and that these days of Purim should never fall into disuse among the Jews, nor should the commemorations of these days cease among their descendants. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jews gave full written authority, confirming the second letter about Purim. The letter were sent to all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus in words of peace and truth, that these days of Purim should be observed at their appointed season, as Mordecai the Jews and Queen Esther obligated them, as they had obligated themselves and their offsprings, with regard to their fast and their lamenting. Command of Esther confirmed these practices of Purim, and it was recorded in writing. King Ahasuerus imposed a tax on the land and on the coastlands of the seas, and all the act of his power and might, and the full account of the high honor of Mordecai, to which the king advanced to him, are they not written in the books of a chronicle of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was sent in rank to King Ahasuerus, and he was a great among the Jews, and popular with the multitude of his brother, for sought the welfare of his people, and spoke peace to all his people. Well, now you actually heard the full story of Esther and the originations of what Purim, the feast, started, and what this Purim feast is all about. So, let me see if I can actually find some so the hang on 1 second. In Israel, not only in Israel, but also anywhere in literally where the Jewish community is, this this Purim festival and the feast is still kept even until today. And on this day, when they're having this feast, this is the day that it's just literally the Jewish people go nuts. Literally, that's what happened. I will show you some videos, but what they do is not only actually they're having lots of fun, just like the Halloween day for Americans, right? People actually put on all kinds of weird customs, that they're having parties and they're going to trick or treats, and they're having, it's like such a fun day for going around and doing all kinds of stuff, right, on the Halloween day. Very similar to this, on the Purim festival, that's exactly what they do. they put on all kinds of customs, and they just like going around having a party all over the place. They're sharing food. They're like stomping on their like ground and then say, "Hey, the Haman, the evil Haman." Well, like they're claiming out still today, and they're sharing cookies that showing that was Haman's ears, and all kinds of weird stuff that they do. Like, but they're like they go really nuts on this particular day. And not only that, they're only just reading Esther, the book of Esther as well, on this day. Of course, not everyone, the Jewish people, are religious people. Some people actually just have, some understanding that all Jews are like religious. Not really. Not really all Jewishes are religious. But whether you're religious or non-religious, on the Purim festival, they're all come out and enjoy. So, let me see if I can actually find some video here. So now you know the not only history of the Purim, but also what they do and how they actually celebrate, and and why they are celebrating on this day. But what's important here is this. We know the story of the Esther. So what do we actually learn from the story of Esther? What's important is this. Literally, this is the story of Mordecai and Esther, Haman, as well as the king Ahasuerus. Literally, right? But what's important? Remember, I mentioned Mordecai did not want to show respect to Haman. And I told you this is not the religious reason why he did not bow down, because it's not like he was bowing down to like some sort of an idol. It's just he was a high official. One way or another, you show respect to the people, right? That's what is supposed to happen. But Mordecai did not want to show any respect to Haman. So remember, let me see if I can actually find the Mordecai. The name of Mordecai is this. Let me show you this. You have no idea what you're looking at right now. But this, on the right side, this is Marduk. Marduk is one of main god of Babylon serve. Marduk is literally the god of Babylon who they've been serving. And this is the Marduk that you're looking at. And this is Marduk. So, Babylonians worshipped this Marduk as their god. Mordecai, literally name coming from Marduk worshiper. That's what the meaning of a Mordecai. Mordecai means coming from Marduk, worshiper. So when you actually look at the name of Mordecai, that's a Babylonian name. And then the name, like who would actually give the name of, the Marduk's worshiper? But this is important for you to remember. Mordecai actually caused this trouble, not showing the respect to Haman, right? That's how everything started. If he showed the respect to Haman, this would not have happened. But because he did not show the respect to Haman, and Haman was upset and mad, he wanted to remove and made this as a chance to remove the entire Jewish community. Think about this. Mordecai is the one who caused this to literally kill all the Jewish people. Think of this as a story of Adam. From one man, that literally everyone became a sinner. Because of one man, Mordecai, which is the worshiper of idol, caused all this trouble. That he brought the sin and he brought the death upon everyone. Almost he brought all the sins upon entire man on earth through Adam. Mordecai is like that kind of person who brought the disaster upon every Jewish people in the land. And he was the one who caused the problem. Esther is the one who actually showed up. Queen is the one who says, if I perish, I perish. What did she ask for? 3 days. I want you to fast for me. 3 days. What does that mean? Almost it represents Jesus Christ. It's not because of Mordecai, but because of Esther. Esther is almost a symbolized of Jesus. And what Esther does is because Esther is the one who actually perished. If I perish, I'll perish. And fast for 3 days, and 4th day, she comes out to the king. And because of what she did, she took the path of death that turns everything into the path of a living. Because of what Esther had done, every Jewish people was saved. Trouble started from the Mordecai, who is name has worshiper of Marduk, and brought the disaster upon all the Jews, but because of the Esther, who were saved, not because of what the Mordecai had done, because of what Esther had done. They were able to spare their life. What is this? It's almost the same story as through Adam, the sin came to all mankind, and death came to us. But through Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection, he's the one who brought the peace and salvations to all mankind. Mordecai was that model. Haman, on the other hand, is representing the evil, trying to kill every mankind and every sinners and every Jews. And because of what Esther had done, he was destroyed at the end. And all the followers were all destroyed. That's the end of the Bible. That's when Revelation, how it ends. The evil is destroyed. When you look at the Esther, we shouldn't be reading as the Esther as a fun story, but read as a story of a salvation, what Jesus had done, what Adam brought to the mankind, and what Jesus had done to brought to the mankind. Through Adam, like Mordecai, death came to us. But through Jesus Christ, like Esther, who brought the salvations to us. So when you look at the entire story of the Esther, this is a story of the salvations of a Jesus Christ. This is what this book is about. So as long as you get the message of what I describe, and when you just put everything together, you should understand exactly what this Esther is all about. Getting understanding of it. So hope you get the full message of Esther. Any question?